Hello, good afternoon. It's Friday, February 12th at 1 p.m. Pacific time. I'm Alison Pitt, and you're watching Daily Star Trek Views, the live version of Daily Star Trek News, where we go a little off script. It's good fun, and I have visual aids today. It's going to be a good time. Hello to everyone who's in the chat. Thank you for joining me. Let's see. We've got Peter, BC, Kaiser, Richard, Mohammed. Hello, everyone. Paul, happy Friday, Paul. Thank you for joining me. So we're going to talk about Lower Decks today. Richard says it's a taste that he's acquiring. Yeah, I've actually heard that from a few people. It's a lot first when you first start watching it, but I really think it's a really fantastic Star Trek show. But yeah, so we're going to talk about the third episode of season 1, which is called Temporal Edict. We're going to talk about that in the second half of the show. And but before that, I just got a few things. And of course, show and tell, because I almost forgot last week. So show and tell today is this bad boy. That is an officially licensed Type 2 phaser, stuffed and gigantic. And I hope one day, so I bought this in 2016. It was my first STLV, and they were sort of cleaning up at the end. Like, if you ever go to a Star Trek convention, at the end of the weekend, they always have really good deals on all the stuff. Everything gets discounted because nobody wants to take it home. They want to sell it. So yeah, the whatever booth was selling these had them on super discount. I mean, it was like $15 or something like that. It was crazy. I bought one, and my friend Mark McCulloch, who used to be a host on Priority One as well, I think he bought a tricorder. I have a really great picture somewhere that I'm going to have to dig out of us just snuggling our gigantic stuffed things. And what was funny was, because at the time I lived in England, so me coming over for STLV was like that was a long journey. And I really didn't have room in my suitcase for this. I ended up carrying it on the plane with me, and like I had a whole script that if anybody challenged me, I was gonna be like, no, it's a neck pillow. It's for sleeping on the plane. It's a neck pillow. It's just, novelty. Anyway, I didn't need to do that in the end. They just let me carry it, but I did have to carry it on board, which because I mean, try fitting that in a suitcase, and because I'd come from overseas, like I had so much stuff in my suitcase. Mind you, I'm nowhere near, what a lot of people do for STLV, because I don't do cosplay every day, but boy, that was fun. Anyway, so that's my stuffed phaser. By the way, if you're ever thinking about getting one of those, probably don't, because it's really hard. It sits in the corner of my bedroom just behind a chair because there's no place else to put it. So there's that. I've just noticed that Chris has popped into the chat. Say hi, Chris. Say hi to everybody. Say hi to Chris. Another great week. It actually leads nicely into the first thing that I wanted to talk about this week, was just that it's slow out there. And I guess I've been doing this a while. We're actually going to come up on. We are 2 months away from Daily Star Trek News being 2 years old. So this show, officially, technically, the first time I recorded one, and it was a test one, was the 10th of April, 2019. So we're just under 2 months away from Daily Star Trek News being 2 years old. We've had a few periods of slow news week, and this is a typical period. So we've just come off the end of 23 straight weeks. We don't have anything else coming up, but we know that there's a big push for Paramount Plus. So I would expect towards the end of this month, we'll get a lot more. I don't know that we'll get any news unless they're planning on doing a big launch of, like, if they're planning on like premiering Strange New Worlds at the end of March or something, which they're not. I don't think they are, but I think what we're going to see is promotional materials. So I'll try and share the things that come up as much as I possibly can, but mostly it's going to be pretty quiet. Chris and I have our little tricks of keeping tabs on everything that's going on, but we're probably going to end up focusing on a lot more sort of fan-based things, talking about what the celebrities are doing. Chris did a great story in today's episode about a chap in Indiana who has built um, basically a starship and a TARDIS in his basement. And, while we can't show off every single person who's done that, this guy has actually created a YouTube channel where you can go and he talks you through all the technology that he's put in. And it's really fascinating to go and browse that YouTube channel. So if you get a chance to do that, do that. Anyway, the other thing that you're going to hear a lot more of is stuff that people are selling. And I don't know if you saw my unboxing. I don't know if you can see it back there. There it is. The tridimensional chess set from the Noble collection. I did an unboxing with my daughter, who was very excited about doing that. Go and check that one out, because that's a really nice piece. And of course, the new Kobayashi Maru game that came out. So I think there's, the fact that we don't have Star Trek on television right now, it doesn't mean that the fandom has slowed down at all. So it's just going to be a slight change of the types of content that we see for the next few weeks. So yeah, that's pretty much it. I also wanted to point out, there was a thing that might have got a bit lost this week because there was a lot going on. I wanted to show you guys this book, and I have a link to show you. That's Walter Koenig's book, and so I'm not I'm a kind of a slow reader, and because I'm always busy, it's hard for me to sit down and kind of get into something, but I really wanted to just point that out and recommend that you go and read it, because it's a really it was unexpected. It's really not not at all what I knew about Walter Koenig, and the way that he writes is very candid and engaging, and I think you'll find it funny, and also it's a really cool insight to how do I put it? It's a really cool insight into the mind of somebody who he thought he was supposed to do something else. He thought he was going to be like a doctor or something. But then he just never, all roads just kind of kept going back to acting. And he talks very frankly about, his childhood and the events in his life that led to how his personality is, and the path that he took to becoming an actor, and highs and lows, and it's really, really good. So if you have any interest at all, I would highly recommend it. There's some cool behind the scenes stuff in there. There's pictures and everything. It's great. I can't recommend it enough. Hang on just 1 second. I have a link that hang on. This is an Amazon link. We do get affiliates for it, so just I'm not trying to pull one over on you. I do think it's a great book. It's really big. That's the only thing I will say. It's 350 pages, and it's up next to my head for scale, and I have an unusually large head, so it's important knowledge for that. BC. I was hoping to have one over on you. I thought I hoped that you would be like, "Oh, where's the moon?" I'd be like, "Joke's on you." I had this whole thing planned out. But you pay attention to the moon phases, so I can't. Yes, it's a new moon. It's a new moon, so no moon today. Okay. So what we're gonna get onto is Lower Decks. Actually, let me real quickly. I think there was a couple questions here, so I don't want to ignore you guys. Wait, where is it? Okay. Paul says, what did you think about the Trek cameos in the Super Bowl Paramount Plus commercial? I loved them. I love them. Apparently there was some controversy. I try to stay unless I go looking for Star Trek content on social media, I tend to kind of stay away from it because I don't want to be influenced by the drama. Apparently there was drama over Spock dancing or something. I thought they were wonderful. That whole series I thought was super engaging, and it was just tremendously fun. So I loved them. So I'm good with that. Yes, BZ Koenig, the guy who played that guy on the other show. In that book, the story that he tells about being cast as Chekhov is particularly hilarious because he was already old enough that he was actually like his hair was actually thinning when he was cast in that role, and to hear him talk about the wardrobe and them figuring out how like what wig to have him wear is just it's so charming and it's so wonderful, and you've got to read it. So, yeah. Anyway, okay. Yes, Paul Spock. So there was a short promo that Paramount Plus did. You can find it on their Twitter, and I think I retweeted it as well. That when SpongeBob is like in the dome singing "Sweet Victory," Spock's there like this with his eyes closed, and I guess some people took offense to that. Spock can groove. I think people forget that Vulcans are intensely emotional people, and they have trained themselves to compartmentalize their emotion and behave in a way that is governed by logic. But Vulcans are intensely emotional people. They're not emotional. They just choose to act with logic. So absolutely, Spock can groove. That's what I have to say about that. Right. So, Lower Decks. The episode that we're talking about today is Temporal Edict. And there's a time element. And it starts off talking about buffer time. And, I think it introduces you to, like, it starts you off reinforcing what you already know about the lower deckers, that they're losers and they're lazy and they're just lower decks and they're just, whatever. But it kind of turns that on its head. Now, I will let you in on a secret. The preparation for this show, I had this whole thing, right? I had this whole narrative that was going to talk about how like this story is classic Trek, and it's the story of two extremes meeting each other in the middle. So you have the lower deckers are always slacking off and they're always about fun, and the bridge crew's always uptight, and then they find that both are but actually, that's not true at all. I'll tell you why, because they don't meet in the middle, do they? They the lower deckers drag everyone down with them. It basically, this is a lesson for. You could argue that Boimler and Mariner have learned individual lessons for them personally. We'll get onto that in a second. But primarily, this is Captain Freeman learning the lesson of buffer time and how valuable that is. And I can't help but feel, in a little way, it's the writer's way of encouraging us as the viewing audience to loosen up a little bit as well, because traditionally Star Trek is focused on the bridge crew, right? We when people dress up, they dress up as Riker or Picard or Worf or something. It's we've been conditioned to identify with the bridge crew. So to have Freeman stressing out and imposing rules, which sometimes the Trek fandom tries to do that and assert their authority over what happens in their domain, right? It's sort of encouraging us to loosen up, and maybe the way that these guys do it is actually the way forward. So yeah, I was going to do that storyline. Now I've actually changed my tune in the course of sort of talking through it with myself. This is really a story about the benefits of slacking off. They, even at the beginning of the episode, when Tendi expresses some reticence towards buffer time, and of course Boimler just blurts it out about buffer time because he doesn't believe in it. It's not. As a society, we aren't, you're supposed to be working all the time. I have this problem, mind you. I'm looking for a job. I'm doing this show. I'm doing about a million other things. I've got kids. I've got stuff. The temptation to constantly be busy is pretty strong, and so you're at the start of the episode. You're kind of led to believe that like the buffer time is like slacking off, right? It's It's cheating the system. It's kind of getting your way and not fulfilling your duties, which of course is then reinforced by Captain Freeman wanting to like really, tighten up the ship. And she institutes this timer system, which of course they take to the ridiculous extreme. Of course they do, because that's the nature of the show. Um, and then you end up with this sort of two-pronged story. And I had initially thought, oh, it's an A-B plot. It's not really an A-B plot. It's actually the same plot because, of course, the action that's happening on the planet where they accidentally give him a log. You know what I'm talking about? Instead of the crystal. That has direct consequences for what's happening up on the ship. So it really is just it's just two aspects of the same story that's going on, and it's funny because you get there's not a lot of lessons to be learned on the planet, but up on the ship you've got Freeman who's still trying to desperately just demonstrate that she's in control, that she runs a tight ship and all this stuff, and it's actually literally to their detriment, because she's ordered her people to both fight off an invasion and do all of their other tasks, and they have to be under strict Starfleet protocol to do it. She restricts them, and they are not able to perform the way they need to, and they're just completely overrun by dudes with spears. I love how, I forget who it was, they're like, how did they even get up here? There's a lot, and actually, I want to take a little detour. It's an interesting thing to think about. They played with this idea that, okay, this is a civilization that clearly has warp capability because they are joining the Federation, but they are spears, and the lower decks, or well, the Starfleet crew continually looks down on them. At least twice I can think of is the first time, and Mariner's like, dude, we live on a starship. Nobody's dying from a spear. But then also when you get up to the ship, I think it might have been Rutherford was like, they have spears. How did they get up here? And it turns out that Starfleet, highfalutin Starfleet got overrun by, for themselves. They screwed themselves into being invaded, basically. So, through all this, what they end up having to learn is that loosening up is okay. I'm going to put Mariner over here in a box for a second because that's not what she personally learned. But, I loved the scene towards the end where Boimler goes to the bridge and he's like, he figures out I've got a phaser. He goes to the bridge and he's talking to Captain Freeman, who it's buried. She's buried herself under the weight of this responsibility to keep everything perfect. All of her people on the bridge have either passed out or just fallen asleep. I can't tell which. But because she's put herself under the same timers, she's just going nuts and she's not being effective at anything. And finally, Boimler sits her down, and this is a great tactic. Literally says to her, "You're a great captain. Let them be a great crew." And there's a couple things in there. Number one, Boimler said exactly what she needed to hear, which was, "You're a great captain," because that's what she's like. She's got a perennial inferiority complex, right? But he's absolutely right that while somebody like Boimler, he was thriving in that environment, not everybody does. I think we talked last week about this idea in Star Trek that you have a diverse team, not necessarily like racially, gender, or whatever, but a diverse in terms of skills and personalities, and how every person in Star Trek has an inherent value and an inherent place within the team. And we've got the same type of theme coming back, which is wonderful to see, because I don't think in the real world, I don't think we get a lot of that. We get a lot of typecasting, and there's a certain type of person that you need to be in order to be successful. What you tend to neglect, or what, we often neglect in this age of like celebrity and everything else, is that you can have a really, really great effective team by diversifying, by making sure that everybody has a different job to do. If you have a team of people that has a Shax who's always wanting to fight things, and a Boimler who is really crap at fighting, but meticulous and efficient and always follows the rules. Those two people work really, really well together, and they together are better than either one individually. And so we kind of have come full circle again to that same theme at the end of this episode. And of course, it's a happy ending because Captain Freeman's like, "You're right. Do what you got to do." And then we have this wonderful montage of all of once the crew is given the freedom to be their creative selves, they have this wonderful montage of all the different ways they're repelling the intruders, and it's wonderful. Um, there's also a little bit of a theme of trust and respect there because Freeman seems to have forgotten that all of the people on this crew, despite the fact that she kind of, like I said, she has an inferiority complex. She believes that like they have something to prove. But every single one of the people on the ship has gone through Starfleet Academy and they've graduated, which means that they have an inherent level of skill, and they should be allowed to apply that as they see fit because they should be the experts for themselves. And so that's what you get at the end is people, smashing people's faces in with pads and like chucking it across the main engineering and all that. And it's hilarious, but it also is a really valid, important lesson. This is one of the things that I like about Lower Decks is because these moments are silly, but they're grounded in what I would consider to be like really mature, thoughtful, societal practice. I don't know how to phrase that better. But this show doesn't give people an excuse to behave in a way that is, I don't know how to say it, unenlightened, maybe immature, maybe. When people try to pull that, they get, I wouldn't say slapped down, but they get pulled back into actually what's really a healthy culture. So like the toxic behavior. Freeman's behavior at the beginning was super toxic. The rules that she imposed were entirely imposed because her ego felt bruised at not being able to lead this thing on Cardassia Prime, right? So her behavior was incredibly toxic by shutting everything down and making everybody do exactly what she says all the time. And by the end of the episode, she has learned that lesson and pulled back to a much more healthy type of relationship where she's recognizing the agency and the good abilities of all the people that work on the ship. So yeah, we have like sorry. We have stupid like juvenile humor. Sorry, he's got wood. Come on. Like it's stupid juvenile humor. But it's all sort of serving the purpose of getting you engaged with what is actually like some really mature storytelling. And I love that. It's one of the reasons that I really can't get enough of this show. Having said that, this type of story, I think I wrote this down in capital letters. This type of story is a little bit derivative. Obviously, we were going to learn the lesson. Like it was the whole setup was such that we were going to learn the lesson by the end, and we did. That's fine. But I'm okay with that. I think that sometimes it's okay to have a simple, relatively derivative story when it is effective at kind of getting the point across. And they did a good job of that here. I think that in modern entertainment, I say modern, it's different. Things are different now than. Yes, Paul says, "You see, Timmy." Yes, exactly. That's exactly it. I judge everything against what happened in the 80s, right? Sorry, because that's what that's where I grew up. That was formative to me. Um, there's Today we have real emphasis on novel storytelling, something that's super clever. Because when you have a truly new story, they get a lot of praise because it's like, wow, we've never seen that before. That's something I never considered. But we also have a much bigger Hollywood industry than we've ever had at any point in history. Not every story can be new, and the problem is you run the risk of, like, you're trying to tell a new story and you just end up making it unnecessarily complicated. I think Discovery falls into this trap a lot. They were better in the 3rd season, but certainly in the first 2 seasons, there was a lot of, "We're gonna tell this amazing, great novel story," when you didn't need to. You can tell simple, classic stories well and have them be super effective and things that people wanna buy into because that's entertainment. Not everything has to be, like, completely mind-blowing. So, yeah, once again, the writers of Lower Decks have really sort of outdone themselves, and, I just think it's a wonderful show, and especially that this idea that everybody's sort of one crew. Um, I never talked about Mariner and the lesson that she learned. Her whole thing, I think it's an interesting. I criticized Freeman for having an inferiority complex, and I criticized her for her toxic behavior and being really reactionary to the Cardassia thing. Um, it's Their relationship is really interesting because Mariner is clearly someone who has been raised by that person and has her own set of complexes and neuroses, and so she she purposely denigrates herself. That's why she has this enormous wealth of ability and knowledge, but she keeps doing things to sabotage herself so she stays in the lower decks. And I think this it I we're gonna see her character journey over the season because we just are, because that's just the way they've set it up. But, we're starting to see her, have a bit of an appreciation for the Upper Decks people, and starting to see, I think, that not only it's that diversity thing, right? She thinks they're all stuck up and stuffy, and, um she she gets stabbed in the foot and she respects him for it. That's a learning character moment for Mariner, is to see that this guy who's like like, Ransom, he's everything that she hates about Starfleet, like his slicked back hair and his perfect body, and he just talks like he's always making speeches, and he's like he's like a perfect combination of Riker and Picard, right? And, she just got that little bit of respect for him when he stabbed her in the foot. So she's kind of coming towards Boimler, I think, while at the same time he's coming towards her. Anyway, my point being is, again, I can't say it enough. These are, stupid, ridiculous, funny stories that are told from a place of, like, real heart, and I appreciate that. That's me and my rant done. I get the feeling that I'm gonna actually say the same story every week. I'm gonna try not to, because 'cause it'll be repetitive and boring for you people, but, that whole theme of, um, the stories with heart is a real big one. Honestly, I think that's what got Mike McMahan this job. I have somewhere on a shelf over here, I've actually got, the TNG season 8 is no, not TNG season 8. He did a book, and I can't remember. TNG season 8, I think, is the, Twitter account that he did. And going back and reading some of that, it's very clear that he just absolutely loves Star Trek. And that comes through completely in Lower Decks, which makes it easy to love. Right. Um, You guys have been quiet in the chat today. Paul says, it is actually the truest representation of a ship's crew in Trek, even if exaggerated, having served on 6 aircraft carriers. That's a lot. We minions below never had any idea what was going on up there, especially when you consider that there was, 7 people on the Enterprise D on the bridge. Like, that was the main bridge crew, and, they didn't work 24/7. There's, 1,000 people. That's why that episode Lower Decks was so, important. There's a dude who that just works in the Arboretum, right? There's got to be a dog handler person, right? These people never have any idea of what's going on the bridge, and I kind of like to think that they have a little more respect for the bridge crew and a little better understanding than than the lower deckers and lower decks do. But by the way, this series could have been a disaster. You know, Sometimes I think about that. And I don't think I haven't seen any kind of viewing figures, based on, I can see the viewing figures of my reviews for this, and they're lower than Discovery, and part of that's because it's not on except for, overseas. My perception, and just based on when it was on the air, the types of stories that we were getting for Daily Star Trek News, my perception was that the ratings for Lower Decks were not as, the viewing figures were not as big as, one of the big for Discovery or Picard. And it could have been a disaster. It was, and there's some I gotta say, the moment in the first episode when Mariner accidentally just stabs Boimler's leg with the batleth. I hate that moment. It makes me cringe so bad because I can't watch it. It's too it's I can't watch it. And I wish to God that moment hadn't happened that early in this series, because I nearly turned it off. The first, when I having seen the promos, I was like, I don't want to watch this show. If it's gonna be all gross out and pain, and I don't want to do that. I think it could have been a disaster, and I'm really, really, really pleased to see that it isn't. And I want to share the knowledge that there's dumb jokes, there's stupid jokes, there's juvenile jokes, but this is a top class Star Trek show. So, yeah. Paul, it wasn't just the gory; it was also the sound. I'm a sound person. I just it's not. It's funny because I don't have the same reaction to the Bolian guy getting stabbed in this episode, but then I'm 3 episodes in. And it's a shame because that scene is so perfect. I could rant about everything, but that scene in the hallway where she's been drinking the Romulan whiskey, and she's got the palette, and that's amazing. And it got ruined at the end, but it's okay. Anyway. Right. Paul in the chat talking about what we were talking about just a second ago with the lower deckers and what they know. All hands abandoned ship, and Mott the Barber's going, what? He's in the middle of a fade, right? Dear me. And yes, Mohammed, you're right. The TNG episode Lower Decks has actually a pretty dark ending. But good. I mean, I think it's good. And Christoph, it's underrated by CBS. Lower Decks is underrated by CBS, and currently is favorite post-Berman Trek show for sure, which is cool. That's high praise. Right. So that's all I have for today. Thank you for listening to me ranting again. I appreciate you being here. And of course, if you're new here, if this is the first video that you're watching, please make sure to subscribe to the channel. I appreciate it. We do a lot of videos. This week has particularly been video heavy, so sorry about that. I think I've published with this one, I think it's going to be 8 videos this week, which is kind of a lot. Um, and if you like what we're doing here on the show or the newsletter or the website, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It's patreon.com/daily Star Trek news. We depend on your support to help us keep things going and growing things. And if Chris is still here, send him a big thank you because he helps keep me in line. Um, that's all I have for today. Thank you again for coming, and have a lovely weekend. And we will see you on Monday, bright and early. Okay. Live long and prosper, guys. Have a good weekend.